with guys just not being motivated at all to raise money, guys just not really caring. And I think you need to do a couple of things. One, you need to be able to empathize with them.
You're listening to the Teke Nation podcast with Donnie Aldrich, where we strive to educate, inspire, and entertain you with tips and lessons from frauders and friends of TKE. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Teke Nation. This is Cole Connor, your undergraduate representative on the Grand Council, coming to you today live with a special St. Jude episode of the Teke Nation podcast. We've brought some of the fundraising juggernauts from the Virginia Tech chapter, as well as the godfathers who laid the foundation to raise over $500,000 in 3 years for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. It's my hope today that we can get a sneak peek into the Krabby Patty formula that is Teke Week at Virginia Tech. But before we get into that, let's go around the horn and meet some of the people we've got the pleasure of talking to today. I want to start with the grandfathers. Chris, Paul, give us a little more information about you guys.
All right, I guess I'll start. How's everyone doing? My name's Chris Catizone. As you noted, graduate of Virginia Tech. I graduated in 2017. I started my Teke experience in the fall of 2013 in my freshman year at Tech. And yeah, now I'm living up in New York and happy to continue contributing to Teke and giving back. And yeah.
So my name is Paul Feghali. How you guys doing? Just like Chris, started off my Teke experience several years ago, graduated in 2018. Chris and I really revamped the entire process of what was going on with their fundraising. So, really fortunate, for those experiences that, we shared together. Now I live up in Detroit, work at General Motors. So living up here in Detroit, the Paris of the Midwest.
Last but not least, we've got the man who runs the showdown in Virginia Tech, Piero.
Hey guys, obviously as introduced, my name is Piero. I'm the current pretenist over at Virginia Tech's chapter of Teke, the Xi Omega chapter, and I've been at Virginia Tech actually since my sophomore year. Interesting experience going in and meeting a great group of guys there when I transferred into the school, and it's been a great ride ever since, and happy to talk about the awesome stuff that we've been doing lately with St. Jude.
Awesome. Well, I kind of wanted to get the ball rolling here today. Starting with Chris and Paul. You guys have laid a foundation that's incredible. I mean, it's super unique. But we all know why you guys are here. You're the best in the business. But it didn't happen overnight. You guys didn't wake up one day and just say, we're going to raise $500,000 in 3 years. What was that snowball effect like? Where did that come from?
Sure. That's a great question, Cole. I guess I'll start since I was at Virginia Tech before Paul. I guess a little more background. Prior to me being at Virginia Tech in 2013, Teke ceased to exist on campus. So I think in around 2012 is when Teke started to fight for their recognition back on Virginia Tech's campus, and in 2013 they got that back. And they organized what was at the time their first Teke Week, getting people involved to raise money for St. Jude. And that year they raised something like $8,000. And I know at the time that probably seemed like $1 million. The year after that, 2014, was my first Teke Week at Virginia Tech. And we raised about $25,000. And it was that year that our leadership, our president, our philanthropy chairs and whatnot, made a commitment to raising $100,000 in 5 years, right? So I think a big and integral part of our success is committing ourselves to something, greater than ourselves. And the quote I always like to say is, sometimes you'll be planting a seed so that somebody else can sit in the shade in the future. These guys that established the initial framework when we were raising a few $1,000s wanted to do something that they weren't even going to be there to see the benefits of, right? So 2015 rolls around and we raised about $40,000. Year after that, Paul and I had an incredible experience to go down to Memphis, Tennessee and visit the hospital and be a part of one of the marketing campaigns with St. Jude and Teke. And, that experience, I'd say, really, really shaped my passion for this cause. Getting to meet patients, getting to meet the families of patients, and seeing what our money is really going towards. And, I'll never forget that plane ride coming back from Memphis, Tennessee. Paul and I were sitting next to each other, and at the time, Paul had the title of philanthropy chairman. I said, man, like, we got to do something. I want to do something more. How can I help you? Let's do something great. And I guess I'll pass the torch over to Paul to take it from there. But that's really when we started to work together, right after that trip down to Memphis, Tennessee, and I believe it was 2016.
Yeah, I mean, that trip played a huge foundational part in, revamping the whole thing and doing what we did and leading to the success we achieved. It's crazy to think that in retrospect, this was 2016. I was supposed to go down with the former philanthropy chair, and he actually wasn't able to make the trip. So, I'm looking around, who we should be able to take advantage of this opportunity. So I knew he was a very passionate guy, and we were talking about it, and he was like, "All right, I'll join." So we went down there, and it's funny because had it not been Chris, we wouldn't be sitting here today, talking about this. So when we went down, we met this little girl named Abigail, and Chris and I shared that unique moment where that girl's story inspired us. She was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She had no idea what was going on. She was very young, maybe 4 or 5, but her parents were, they were crying, but they were smiling, so thankful for the work that we've done. And we're like, we haven't really done much, but they were blessed that there were people fundraising and raising money for St. Jude to help a girl like Abigail. So we came back, and this is spring of 2016. We said, all right, guys, let's go ahead. Let's raise $50,000. And everyone's like, well, that's kind of a big jump from what we did last year. From, I think it was initially 32 and then got up to 40. But I think the Teak week specifically prior it was about a little less than a 50% jump. So we're like, don't worry, Chris and I will be setting everything in plan. All you guys have to do is come support the events, just participate, get excited, send out some emails and whatnot. And that year we raised, $62,000. So building off that momentum, Chris and I were like, all right, well, if we can jump that high, then why don't we just, shoot for the stars and, do $100,000? What's holding us back from there? So we come back. This is winter of 2016. So we're just beginning 2017 in January. So first semester of spring coming back in 2017, Chris and I go into chapter. And we go in and we say, all right, guys, we're getting ready for Teak week. We've been preparing all these things and whatnot. But we really want to push up our goal. Last year we said we're going to do 50. We hit 62. We're going to do $100,000 this year. And the room was dead silent.
Silence.
Like you could hear a pin drop. It was crazy, and then one of the guys, so we kind of knew this was going to happen. So we socialized the idea prior to a few people. And so one of the guys, 10 seconds into the silence just goes, let's do it. And everyone just looks at him. And, he wasn't like, one of those big dudes that, has a loud voice, he was one of the more quiet. And everyone was like, what? And then another guy from across the room goes, 100%, let's do it. And the next thing you know, you just have this room of 100 guys just yelling, let's do it. There's $100,000. Let's become the biggest fraternity at Virginia Tech for, philanthropy.
Getting goosebumps over here.
Yeah. And so, we left that meeting, we were fueled. We were completely fueled. And Chris and I knew, we had to provide everyone the resources they needed to succeed. And a lot of different things, had to go into play. Chris and I spent countless hours of planning to make the work as easy as possible for the individuals to raise the money. Teak week started. By the third day of Teak week, we raised $100,000. We had 3 more days to go. So we said, forget the $100,000. Let's go to the biggest philanthropy in Virginia Tech history and raise $150,000. That year, we ended at $152,000 raised in about a week, becoming one of the biggest fraternity philanthropies in the United States. And it's crazy to think about how just a few years prior, when Chris was talking about they set up their first Teak Week, they only raised $8,000. And, that jump literally, just came from the hunger and the passion of the brothers. It wasn't just one of us that really changed the game here. It was, the combination of everyone's commitment to doing this. And then from there, that was my junior year, Chris's senior, he graduated. Wanted to make sure that the work we implemented was sustainable. So I stepped down from the position and coached Adam Spears and David Anon. And Chris, obviously coached as well. And then that year they raised $200,000. And right now we've been steadily flowing around there. And this year I think the guys just raised about 157. So, it's crazy to think about, we did all this and how sustainable it is, and it shows how it permeates the culture.
That's incredible. So, Piero, you now man the battleship. You're the captain of the ship. I mean, did that come naturally, or did you, have to learn it? Were you coached upon it, similar to, what Paul and Chris did to their successors?
I would say probably it's mostly the work of the philanthropy chairs that does a lot of this. But when it comes to your executive board, from your Preakness down to your hegemon, down to your Grand Mateus, that it's really, it comes down to really what the purpose of the chapter is and what the purpose of being a Teak means. And when I was running for president, that's obviously one huge thing that guys want to see, especially with the history that we've had with Teak Week. And it's so important to implement that core value that we have, and to continue to push that mission and not forget where we are and who we are. Because obviously you can end up turning into a fraternity that is looking, just for the popularity, right? And just for, the fraternal things that we don't like to see, and that isn't really sustainable for the future. And as a leader, in a position that I'm in, and in a position that other people are in, it takes a lot of humility to be in that sort of position and say, hey, we're in this we're all in this together, and we really need to work on this individually. It doesn't just take one person to raise $10,000 by themselves. It takes everybody else lifting themselves up, throughout the week, texting your pledge brother and say, hey man, like, how are you doing with this? How can I help you? And so the philanthropy guys, and as Paul and Chris said, it takes months and months of preparation. They're preparing this back in like October, November beforehand, and we do this in April. So I think the coolest thing that you can see is that how everybody rallies around it so quickly, and how everybody really cares about it. And the biggest thing that we saw, especially from this year, especially being under quarantine, and the guys were really, really not sure about our goal. So we scratched the goal of $150,000, and we said, okay, you know what, we're just going to go for it. We're just going to do our best. And we actually ended up raising $162,000. We had no expectation of even probably reaching $100,000, but it all came down to, how much do we really care about this? And obviously the philanthropy chairs this year were extremely worried, regardless of COVID-19, of quarantine, of keeping that momentum, because the year before we had raised $150,000. The year before that we had raised $200,000. It's really hard to keep that energy up, and really hard, to not settle. And the biggest thing that, Paul and Chris, were telling us was just don't get complacent. Complacency is just is the initial point of failure. And I think that was the biggest point and the biggest thing that we took out of this, is that regardless of the situation, we couldn't get complacent. We had to work, every minute for it, and really had to show how much we cared about the cause. And I think what really showed us we cared about the cause so much that not only did we reach that almost unreasonable goal, we passed it and we kept going. So I guess that's kind of my spiel on what happened from this year. But yeah, it was probably really inspiring this year to see guys sitting at home on their computers and still raising $162,000 for the kids at St. Jude. and having many limited resources and many limited points of awareness that we could raise on campus. And, it really shows in the end, what your core values are.
Yeah, and it speaks to the values that your chapter has and what you guys believe in, and it's incredible. And so you guys, all three of you guys, have kind of touched on this idea of preparation, right, and preparing. And you talk about starting back from October for an event in April. So a lot of our guys, are pretty interested in, how do I emulate something like this in my home chapter, right? I remember, as Chris knows, we tried to emulate this at our chapter back at the University of Houston in the fall. We only raised about $3,000, but we tried again and we just surpassed the $50,000 mark. So, I've got a good idea that, it does take the planning and preparation, but for someone who's never, had the time yet to talk to you guys and understand what that process looks like, could you kind of go into a little more detail on what that process looks like for Virginia Tech and, starting from the very beginning of preparation to, actually having the event? What does that process look like?
Sure. I guess I could start, and I think that's key. Just start. As we've said a number of times, it's building that momentum. And a silly analogy I always like to give is, would you rather have a penny a day doubled over the course of a month or $1 million right now? Right? Everybody knows a penny a day doubled over the course of a month leads to well over $1 million in the long term. And you take that time frame and that analogy and apply it to planning for something. The earlier you start, the more you have, time on your side to compound your efforts into what will inevitably be this great venture, as what we call Teak Week. As Paul alluded to earlier, it's really enabling everyone else to be successful and creating things like these letter templates and these, different Facebook posts and emails and whatnot, because, granted, not everybody in a chapter is going to be as motivated as the people organizing something, right? So I think a big thing that we tried to focus on was making this process easy for those people that were not as motivated, right? Fill in your name, put in the name of the company you're reaching out to, and add your donation link. How much easier could it get, right? And another big thing is having a team. I couldn't have done this by myself. Paul couldn't have done this by himself. The fact that I graduated a year before Paul, left him at Virginia Tech the year after, right? And he had the opportunity to teach the people, in earlier grades who did the same thing to the people who are now running the show, right? So I think there's a lot of different things that go into, the planning aspect, and it really is focused around building momentum and having a strong team. An exercise that Paul did that I absolutely love is for accountability is, giving everybody in the chapter an index card, right? And on that index card, having them write down how much money do you think you'll be able to raise for Teak Week this year, right? And then write down 10 people you're going to reach out to, and then 5 ways that you're going to go about doing that, right? So now you've got your chapter writing down all of their goals and what they think they can raise, how they're going to do it, and who they're going to reach out to. So now as the philanthropy chairman, Paul and I had these index cards, and that was accountability. We're starting to really build our momentum in our efforts, and we see guys haven't made, those St. Jude donation portals yet. We see guys haven't, raised $1, but they said they were going to raise 250. Now we can reach out to them and enable them, right? Give them the tools and the resources to help them hit that goal. And I think that was a very important and integral part of our successes, those intimate one-on-one conversations with guys to see how we could help them, reach that goal. Paul, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Chris made a lot of great points there. One of the foundational aspects that's probably fundamental to this whole thing is education. And educating the person on what they're raising money for. So that means knowing a lot about St. Jude, knowing everything they're involved with, knowing, what their success rate is, being able to fully comprehend what you're raising money for is so important. So what we did to capitalize on that is, I could talk to you all day about St. Jude, founded was in 1962 by Danny Thomas. When it first opened, the pediatric survival rate was 20%. Today it's well over 80, 4% leukemia, now 94% for ALL. You know, I could talk to you all day about it, but it's really not going to get to anything unless you go see it for yourself. So what we did is we planned an annual trip down there for the guys to learn. And it's funny. So everything we did, you know, we had the concept, we had the idea, but then we had to add a twist to it. We had to add an incentive to it. So we planned this trip down to Memphis to go down to the hospital. And, you know, we initially had like 20 guys sign up. We're like, what? That's like a fifth of our team. Like 20 guys. We're like, all right, what can we do here? All right, so let's team up with Tri Delta, get them to come down with us that same weekend. Within a week, you know, we had 60 guys coming down. And, you know, we get down there and we planned with St. Jude everything. You know, we worked very close with their team. And we planned a whole day of activities. And so we get to St. Jude, we take pictures with, you know, everyone, Tri Delta and Tekes and whatnot. And then we split up into two different teams. It's all the Tekes and all the Tri Deltas because we're there for our own organizational understanding. So, and the tours are catered a little uniquely for both. So, you know, we go about the day, we see the hospital, we do the tour, they hear and learn. We're very fortunate. They split us up into small groups of about 6 to 8, and we each had our own tour guide. And then at the end, we all congregated together, and specifically the Tekes, and we heard from patients, and we heard their stories. And you turn around after, you know, one of those speakers would share their story, and you just see a room full of all these, you know, macho fraternity men absolutely in tears, you know, crying because they were so touched and impacted. Now, building up on that momentum Chris is mentioning, we plan this to be a week before we start Teke Week, because once you're able to instill that fire into someone and they're ready and they're hungry and they want to go help, you know, we say, all right, you know, we've set up every single resource we think you need to succeed. And that goes to what Chris is talking about. Every single template that you could imagine is already done. All you have to do is put in a one sentence at the top, one at the bottom, and the whole thing will flow, and you can send it to, you know, whoever you want, all the Facebook posts, you know, everything. And so that right there was, you know, the education was, you know, fundamental to building up that momentum. And then, you know, to what Chris was talking about, having that whole team aspect, and everybody getting behind it and everybody wanting to do it, you know, it's, you know, building, it's all about building the culture around it.
And if so go ahead, Cole.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, one of the things that, you know, I wanted, you know, you talk about this all the time, Chris, is how important it is to visit the hospital. I don't think a lot of people realize like how far that trip is for you guys. It's not a quick little, you know, 1 hour jet over. I mean, explain, you know, the logistics and of just planning such a far trip like that.
I don't even know, what is it, an 11-hour car ride, Paul, Piero?
Yeah, about.
And I think that's a testament to our dedication and passion for this cause. You know, we're driving longer than we're physically at the hospital. We go for what, an hour, 2-hour tour, 3 hours at max after we've had the pleasure of hearing people speak to us. You know, we've fully embraced this culture and passion for the cause. And, you know, I think anybody that lets themselves get vulnerable enough to have something like this influence them, you know, it will inevitably lead to their success and drive their hunger to do more. You know, there's always more we could be doing for this cause.
Yeah. So, I mean, that 11-hour, 12-hour car ride, I mean, that's not something that happens overnight. You know, what's the planning like? Who are you getting in contact with to even plan some kind of trip like that, you know, to get over to St. Jude and get your tours set up? So what does that process look like?
So it's working primarily with your regional representative. You know, St. Jude has them scattered throughout the whole U.S. Ours at the time was, well, actually it switched a couple of times, but I know right now it's Sarah Whitten. I'm working with them to get down there. You know, we've been down there many times, fortunate to have been. So we have a pretty strong network down there. We're working directly with the St. Jude team. But if anyone's looking to get involved, it's a couple simple, I guess, steps. You know, working with your St. Jude representative. I'm working with Nate Lehman. who's, our TKE representative for St. Jude. Just being in touch with those people and knowing you can lean on them, to help facilitate and organize this trip. It's a lot easier, working with them. But, you do have to commit to whatever the distance is. For us, it was 11 hours of driving, overnight, had to get there because they only do the tours during the weekdays. So had to get there for Friday morning tour. So, you just have to commit. But if you're interested, just reach out to your local St. Jude representatives, and, work with them to organize something.
And I think even if you can't physically make the trip, Piero, this year with all the stuff going on with COVID-19, you guys were able to do a virtual tour, right?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, that was super effective because that was one huge thing we were worried about. And what you guys touched on earlier was, kind of instilling a fire within people and really educating people about the cause. We're worried about tons of the younger guys who hadn't even had a trip to Memphis. But luckily, we were able to do that virtual tour. And not only we were able to show our younger members, but we were also able to show our parents at home while we're all sitting at home quarantined. And, I just had my parents sit in on that, and they asked me tons of questions, and they were like, oh, I had no idea St. Jude did this. And when I initially told them about the cause, I was like, yeah, St. Jude pays for everything. And then my dad was like, oh, well, do they pay for housing, food, and all this other stuff? I'm like, yeah, literally everything. Family doesn't get a single bill. I mean, it was one of those like incredible things. It's like, it is a huge realization. It's like, you just show them the simple things, and you show them that tour, and Sarah did an excellent job. I mean, these people are really good at what they do, and they've done it a lot. But, I was able to send that video out to my grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever, you name it. And it was kind of a blessing in disguise too, because, we get to go on the Memphis trip, but of course we can't record it and things like that. So being able to show our donors and our, whoever was supporting us behind this was really cool.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to go in reverse a little bit because, you guys talked about, raising money and the planning that goes behind it. And, I think a lot of our guys are looking for, like the magic bullet. They want to know what's this perfect event, that we're going to raise all this money at, right? Is it, pieing a teak? Is it a dunk booth? Like what's that look like? The awareness versus raising money, where's the formula in that? Like, where have you guys found success in raising the most amount of money for St. Jude?
Sure. Good question, Cole. And I think, with that, it's important to understand where you should be focusing your efforts. So if you look at the breakout year over year of what we were able to raise, let's say my senior year when we raised $152,000, almost 130 of that came from online donation portals that every single chapter already has set up for them. The other $25,000 came from on-campus events. So the way I always looked at it was, have this social media presence and then have your local community, the campus presence, doing a lot of the marketing for you. And what goes into that? We talk about all this planning. It's getting the collective effort of not only your guys, but of all the organizations on campus. So I'll tell you at Virginia Tech, Paul and I would spend our Saturdays and Sundays, going around chapter to chapter and pitching Teak Week. I emailed over 800 student organizations at Virginia Tech to get them to, volunteer their time and contribute monetarily or, just showing up at events. So I think using the size of your campus and, your networks to your advantage is the most beneficial. Like one of the big things we did was, we after we'd get organizations to participate, we'd have them make their own donation links, and then we'd have them post a picture of when they were a baby, right? And write a little excerpt about why they were thankful for their childhood and that experience. And then a little note, that St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gives kids another chance at life, that are fighting these terrible pediatric diseases. And then, with that picture, add your donation link. And you never know who's going to see that on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it might be. So I think leveraging your networks and having a strong social media campaign is very, very key to this success.
Yeah, and Paul, what does it look like when you guys are walking into a a sorority house or another fraternity house? Like, what does it look like? Or when you're stepping into a student orgs meeting, what does that look like when you guys are pitching Teak Week? I mean, how do you get, because you guys have tons of organizations who join with you to help raise all this money. It's incredible. I mean, it's not just the guys from the TKE chapter of Virginia Tech. An entire campus of Virginia Tech students are helping reach one singular cause. So what does that look like when you guys are meeting with people and you're telling them about what you guys are doing?
So there are over 800 organizations at Tech. As Chris mentioned, we reached out to all of them, trying to get them involved in supporting us for Teak Week. And now all these organizations have their own agendas. They have their own philanthropies that they work at. So it's, there's some difficulty in persuading them to support our cause. So, like Chris said, Saturday, Sunday from about 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., we're fully suited up. Tie, actually, no, we didn't wear ties. We just did full button down and blazers and whatnot. That was the one criteria, no ties. And we're fully suited up. We have our pitch down. We have it all nailed down. And we're in there being as professional as possible, showing them as serious as we are. But adding fun to it. And a lot of the times, they get guys just strolling in and, being very monotone in their voices and whatnot. You don't hear their passion behind what they're doing. But, Chris and I had a whole level of passion carrying our conversations through. Now, when you tell these organizations that, the year we want to do $100,000, you said, all right, yeah, last year we did 62. This year we're going to do $100,000. You guys want to help us out? Everybody just looked at us like we're crazy. Trying to raise all this money and, have zero precedence. Everyone looked like we were crazy. And I think that was attractive to people wanting to help the cause, when they found out other people were supporting us. And now the way we facilitated our presentations was, you had to think from political mindset. If you were going into a room of pikes, you had to know at least 10 of those guys in the room. Personally, on a personal level, if you were going to present, because even I could give the best speech I could ever imagine, but if I didn't know 10, then I'm much better off giving it to another guy to present for me, because he has his connections into it. And that's unfortunately just how the world works. Being able to leverage those connections, and being able to get other people involved too. That guy who has all his friends in Pike, he might enjoy going in there and presenting to them and trying to get all those guys fired up with them. So, it's kind of fine tuning and, kind of playing each organization. No, none of them were the same. We had different, strategies and tactics for them, but wow, we spent countless hours presenting to all of them.
Yeah. And you've kind of touched on, getting more guys involved, so it wasn't just you and Chris doing everything. Piero, you've overseen this operation. A lot of guys ask, how can I start this culture? How can I motivate guys at our home chapter, right? Because it's only me who wants to do this, right? What does that process look like for you guys at Virginia Tech? Being their leader, how do you motivate the guys who who haven't been to Memphis and, maybe aren't as motivated to want to raise money for St. Jude? What does that look like for you guys?
Well, I guess for us, I think obviously now Chris and Paul have instilled that culture. So we say, this is what our core value is here at Xi Omega. This is really what makes us who we are. But when you really look at it big picture and to any other chapter out there, look at the simple fact of what you pledge to when you're initiated into the fraternity. You're made to be a better man for a better world. And what better way to do it through St. Jude? Of course, some chapters do some other forms of philanthropy, other forms of service to make, a better community around them. But we have such a huge resource and such a huge way to do it through St. Jude that I think sometimes it really takes a good, like a chapter or whatever meeting it has to sit everybody down and kind of hit a reset button if you need to and say, hey guys, this is really what we're all about. This is something that you're going to remember much more long-term and be much more proud of than, your weekend party or a social here and there. Because you're going to say, hey, I was really able to impact a really good cause in a huge way with my friends for life. And that's an extremely powerful tool and an extremely powerful message that you can give to your guys, because you can say, hey, like, I really care about you guys, and I really want to do something cool with you and something that really, really matters. And going back to what Chris and Paul were saying, it comes down to the fact of doing something greater than yourself. And not only are you doing something greater than yourself, or doing something for greater than yourself through St. Jude, but you're doing it through building a brotherhood and a community at your local TKE chapter. You're doing that by creating this culture and saying, not only am I going to enjoy my time, but enjoy my time while I'm at my chapter and an active member, but you're going to do that through the long term and instill a culture for maybe 5-10 years down the road, and be able to give that same experience to the guys ahead of the line.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things I wanted to touch on, I put on my Instagram last night, I was asking for questions to ask you guys. And I got 2 questions specifically from the Merrimack College, or the Sigma Kappa chapter. One from PJ and then one from a guy named Jake. And they kind of touch on the same thing. So PJ asked, how do you get your guys motivated? And Jake asked a really good question. I think, how do you get the most out of your alumni network for St. Jude fundraising? And how do you approach, looking at alumni and having them get involved in supporting their chapter?
I guess Chris, you can add on this after, but I think the biggest thing, especially for us, and especially since Chris and Paul, created this culture around Teak Week and around, the way we raise money for St. Jude, it was key to use your connections to the best of your ability, and to really use, an alumni like Chris or Paul, who really know the people in their pledge class and whoever they were current members with, to be able to send that message out and say, hey guys, like, this is something we still really care about, contribute if you can, and really use that to the best of your ability. Because of course it's extremely difficult for you to reach out to an alumni you've never met before, and that you've never really, kept in touch with. So, obviously we set up like a Facebook page, an alumni page, where we update our chapter and give a state of the chapter to all of our alumni, and are able to give them that resource. But the best way to do it is through the people that already know them, and that you have a personal connection to. Chris or Paul, if you want to add on that.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And, going off of what you said, having that Facebook group or those, key contacts that you can get in touch with is very important. It's nice to know throughout the year that the house isn't on fire and that things are, running according to plan, right? So don't wait until you're having a philanthropy week or fundraising to reach out to alumni. Keep that contact throughout the year. Maybe send a holiday card. Maybe, after each pledge class, send out, a little bio about all the new guys. Something to keep your alumni engaged, I think is very important throughout the course of the year, rather than just when you need their money. As someone who will always give, it's nice to know that's not my only role. It's nice to know that, my opinions and whatnot are also valued, amongst the undergraduate guys.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to touch again, Paul and Chris, especially, so a lot of our chapters, once again, aren't lucky enough to come into a culture that's just so rich for St. Jude fundraising. When you guys were raising $8,000 a year, Chris, Paul, like, what were you telling these guys who just had no care in the world for fundraising money? Because, a good guy, Ace from the Wabash College, asked me last night, in general, how do you involve members who don't want to participate or even care about philanthropy in events? What can be done to help them get to buy in? I think that would be really helpful to tell some of our guys.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Paul. Let you start this one off.
yeah. Also, like Chris said, he joined TKE back in 2013. When our fundraising numbers were on the lower side, and I joined just kind of right on that cusp, because right when I joined, I kind of took this over. But I faced a lot of that, with guys just not being motivated at all to raise money, guys just not really caring. And I think you need to do a couple of things. One, you need to be able to empathize with them and understand why they don't care. Because you'll find out a lot of the times they don't care is because they just don't know. They're not educated. And they don't know what it is. They can't put it in perspective. I mean, we're lucky for St. Jude. I mean, you're helping kids with cancer. You know, if you know your heartstrings don't pull towards that, then I think there's a much deeper problem with you than you know me getting you motivated. But you know, really being able to connect with those guys and really understanding why they don't care, what it is that they don't see. And then just like anything else, you have to incentivize. You have to incentivize your team to work hard, no matter what you're working on, because at the end of the day, you can't rely on their own self-motivation to do something. Everybody's in for their own reasons, so you need to be able to provide incentives. You know, we got creative with a couple different incentives. You know, for example, we go to formals following Teak Week. We said, you know, you get a free trip to formals, which was a few $100s saved up for you, you know, to give you that opportunity for you and your date to go free, you know, and I guess just motivating them in different ways. But instilling the culture is the difficult part. So what we would do, some small activities is like, you know, Friday night, all right, you know, let's, before we all go out and party and whatnot, how about, you know, a small group of guys come over, we'll just hang out for a little bit, you know, 6, 7, 8 of us, and just start brainstorming on different ideas. And, you know, invite a couple guys, you know, maybe 3 that, you know, are really into it, and then, you know, switch it up, get some guys who've never been involved and get them involved in, you know, thinking of ideas and brainstorming. Because once you're able to have those guys who are not motivated to think of something, they become a little more invested. And once they get skin in the game, they're going to completely take off. So if, you know, they think of a cool concept or idea or a fundraiser strategy, delegate, let them, you know, run off with that idea and do whatever they want with it, and just let them know you'll be there for support. And it will be amazing seeing the results you get from those people.
Yeah, I mean, that's name of the game. One of the things that I kind of also wanted to cover, you know, our chapter, right? Chris, you saw the journey. You know, you guys aren't superhumans, right? You're just your average, you know, Tekes, just like the rest of us across the country. You know, for a chapter who's never done something like this before, you know, what are the steps to starting a tradition like this? Because, you know, at Houston, you know, we took a lot of what you guys did with, you know, the personal links and, you know, using the templates and being able to send those out and kind of setting everything up for success, you know, going into Teak Week with a game plan, starting off, you know, the Dallas Cowboys don't go to the Super Bowl without a game plan, right? Haven't done it in years, but back when they used to. You know, what does that game plan setup look like for a chapter who's never done something like this to hopefully instill a tradition for years to come, like Virginia Tech has?
Paul, do you want me to go or?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm trying to think. You know, as I touched on earlier, I really think it's just a matter of getting started. You know, what's the old saying? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with one single step, right? So to establish something, you just have to be passionate enough and care enough to get started. You know, just like the guys, when we first came back to campus in 2013, established something and raised $8,000, right? They started with nothing but passion. They cared about a cause that was greater than themselves. So, you know, I encourage anybody that's listening to this and passionate and that cares enough to be that person, to be that voice that leads the way. You know, start somewhere and realize that it's not going to happen overnight. You know, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have a lot of days where you're, you know, on top of your schoolwork. You've got late nights working towards this and early mornings, but do it with somebody. You know, I could not have done this without Paul, and I don't think Paul could have done it without me. It's a group effort and it's a team game. And a lot of it's going to fall on you as the one person who's passionate and cares. You know, like we continue to say, we made this process as easy as we could for everybody involved, you know, with these templates, these letterheads and whatnot, you know, because at first, not everybody's going to buy in. Not everybody's going to care the way that you do. But it goes back to that compounding effect that I alluded to earlier. Once you get the ball rolling, you push that snowball down the hill, it just keeps building and building and building and building, so just get started. And maybe the first year you'll raise $500, but the next year, I guarantee you're going to do a little bit more than that. And the year after that, you're going to do a little bit more. You got to keep it going. And you might not be an undergrad when you get to see the success that happens because of what you started. But I guarantee you the guys that started this and cared enough in 2013 to, do the inaugural Teak Week, they're looking back now with big smiles on their face to see that, what was once $8,000 is now $200,000+. So simple point, but just get started and care enough to get started and be passionate about it, because that passion is what emulates and what people grab onto.
Yeah. And our chapter at the University of Houston started, 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago. We started out with a $300 donation. And I remember watching guys in our chapter clap for it, and I couldn't believe it, right? So everybody starts from somewhere. And I think that really, it's a testament to what you guys have done and, practicing on your trade. I wanted to end this podcast as well for Piero, give you a platform to tell us what the future looks like for Virginia Tech. What are your guys' goals, and, where are we headed this next coming year? What do you guys have on the horizon?
Well, hopefully we can be in person in school, first of all. That would be one step in the right direction. But I think, I was really inspired by our pledges, actually, our potential new members. They actually, as a pledge class, raised the most money out of all the pledge classes throughout our chapter. And there was 15 of them, and our average pledge class size is about 20. So with less guys, they raised, I think, between 15 of them, I think they raised over $17,000 or $18,000 between all of them, which, is unheard of. It was just absolutely incredible to see. And I think the future is really bright for these young guys because, being stuck at home and they're being so excited to join a fraternity and, go through the process and understand what it means to be in Teak. Of course, it was really disappointing to be sent home and not be able to go experience that in the same way, at least. We still keep in touch with them, of course, but I think this was a huge point of being able to interact with the chapter, and not only that, but to really care about the cause. When we showed them the tour, the virtual tour, and and then the next day we had our Teak rally, the St. Jude rally. They were immediately hooked. You could see it all in their faces. They were like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen." Raising $20,000 within an hour during the St. Jude rally. So I thought that was so cool, seeing the young guys really, really care about it. And they were like, this is awesome. And I love this group of guys because of it. And that's exactly the culture that we want to keep going, because that's what's going to avoid complacency. Because you only become complacent in this sort of process if it becomes a chore, if this whole philanthropy becomes a chore. Because if it starts feeling like a chore, then that's immediately when you lose it. And that's when you don't have the right intentions for it. You're just raising money to try and raise money for your reputation, rather than raise money because you see, kids at the age of 2, 3, 7 years old, going through such a difficult time with these pediatric diseases. So I think it's for the future, for next year, our goal is probably going to be upwards of, somewhat the same, if not more. We're going to just keep shooting for the stars and shooting for the best that we can. And I wouldn't be surprised if, we continue to do really well with it. I'm honestly just really excited about the group of guys, especially the younger ones who have come up and really, taken that culture full on and said, yeah, I want to own it. And I really want to, do the best that I can for a great cause.
Yeah, and just one last thing, Chris and Paul, you are two guys who are extremely passionate about St. Jude. You guys have created, the foundation that has essentially changed this fraternity and the way that we do fundraising for St. Jude forever. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to speak to in the entire Teke Nation? Maybe give some words of encouragement as, chapters look to begin starting to, change their culture at their home chapter.
Definitely. I would say, first off, I'm extremely proud of Piero and Kyle and Terrence and that team. Continuing this tradition of making better men for a better world, truly delineated through what we're doing and what's going on down there with St. Jude. To all those guys listening, put it in perspective. What did you do to deserve the childhood you had? Because odds are none of us deserved any of the blessings we have. For me to grow up cancer-free versus that girl Abigail I mentioned to be going through different rounds of chemo, I did nothing to deserve the position just as she did. So when you shift the perspective and you create that mindset and you ignite that fire in your eyes and, in your heart to go do something about it, you will run 1,000,000 miles an hour for as many hours as you can imagine. Like it is crazy to think about what you can do when you shift that perspective. There's nothing in your way. You will be able to accomplish anything you want. You'll be able to push past anything you've ever imagined or fathomed, well beyond just what goes on with, the fundraising for St. Jude, but deeper into the meaning of life. When you're able to do something for someone who can never repay you, that's truly when you start digging into the meaning of life.
Chris,
I'm not sure I can follow up with that. It was very eloquently said, Paul.
Yeah, it might have been a little too deep.
No, it was good. It was good.
What was the question again? It was just
just send us home with some motivational advice on, how to hit the ground running, essentially.
Tall order.
You could leave us with a really good quote. I know you got a lot of those. You're a big quote guy. Whatever you feel, or nothing. We could just leave it at Paul.
I don't want to undermine or what Paul said. Any stories come to mind, Paul, that we should touch on, or?
No, Chris and I used to work on a 24-hour cycle. Chris would wake up at 4 or 5 a.m.
Jesus.
And be grinding all day. And then, from there, I would carry the torch and grind till about the time he woke up. Every day. It was just I would wake up to a bunch of updates from Chris, and then he would wake up to a bunch of updates from me. And it was a funny cycle.
It was a fun process. It really was, man. Get so nostalgic thinking about these things, talking about this stuff. It really, really was a great 4 years of my life. I'm very thankful for that.
I definitely do want to say a huge thank you to Tom Kuhn. That gentleman saw so much potential in us that we didn't even see at the time. And he really, knocked down any barriers in our way and was a huge astronomical, asset to our team. And he's the reason for our success.
Yeah, I would touch on that too. As an advisor, he texts me almost every day saying, whether it's Teke Week or not, it just as a, in the position I'm in and having to, manage a lot of stuff, it's like, he texts me with a morning text of inspiration, and I'm back up on my feet and ready to run through a brick wall, and especially during Teke Week, he's like, don't get complacent, keep going. And especially, Chris and Paul and other alumni who are really involved with this too, are just really helped a lot. And, I think, that was a huge key to success, is just being able to, even if you're discouraged in this whole thing and you're overwhelmed and seemingly can't do it, you have a guy who's had the experience since 2012 when, as a chapter, we were restarting and, had to start completely from scratch. And, after 6-7 years, look where we were. And I thought that was probably the coolest, thing I could see.
And I guess I'll end us off with a quote, just because that's That's what I like to do. I'm a big fan of embodying the mantra, jump off the cliff and build your parachute on the way down. Be ambitious in these endeavors and these goals. And, something that Paul and I always would say is like, your greatest danger is not in setting a goal too high and failing to meet that mark. It's setting it too low and reaching it. Everything that we were able to accomplish was because we were ambitious. You asked me or Paul if we were scared when we said we were going to raise $50,000 and then $100,000. Heck yeah, we were. I mean, it's a daunting and frightening thought to put your name, your word, your organization's reputation on the line for something that means more to you than anything else in the world. Man, that says something, and just to conclude, be ambitious. Go out there and make a difference and change the world. That's why we're part of this organization, and we're all capable of doing it. It's been awesome being on this podcast, and I hope everybody enjoys it.
Well, Chris, Paul, Piero, I thank you again for coming in today and giving us a little chunk of you guys' brains today. I really appreciate it. I can't imagine, all the calls that you guys get and text messages and DMs and everything. So, I really, really appreciate, because I know that there are a lot of guys across North America who are really interested in, changing the way that their chapters do stuff and, raising some more money. So this was just, I cannot thank you guys enough. I mean, I go back again on my quote. I mean, this is going to help fundamentally change the way Teke fundraises for St. Jude forever. And, you guys have essentially changed the fraternity. I mean, eventually they're going to write down your guys' names in this Teke guide, years from now, talking about the work that Chris and Paul set out. And I mean, it's just really, really awesome. I love it. Thank you guys for tuning in and spending some time today with us.
Absolutely, man. Happy to do so.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Cole.
Teke Nation, thank you guys for listening in. If you guys have any questions, you guys want to reach out to somebody on the staff because you guys are interested in doing some fundraising, go ahead and reach out to either Nate, your regional director, or somebody at the staff, and they will direct you towards the right people. If you guys really enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know how we did. And if you guys have any future ideas for episodes, go ahead and leave that in the comment as well. We're just trying to give you guys what you guys are looking for.